Aragorn has been 87 years old during the events of the Wars of the Ring. For an 87-year-old geezer, he kept himself pretty well, right? He finally died at the ripe age of 210 years. I can't show you a way to keep yourself just as young looking as Aragorn. This isn't a beauty channel after all, but I can help you with the writing of long-lived people and races in your world by exploring the themes surrounding 4 long-lived people and what makes their age special. A minor spoiler warning for the following properties shown on screen. Immortality, longevity, and agelessness have been a core part of mythology and religion for countless of years, and they found their way into fantasy via folk and fairy tales. In fantasy, the long-lived races appear alien to the younger folk, untouchable in their wisdom and serenity. They tend to be noble, dignified, and virtuous. These attributes tend to either be a consequence of their old age or a gift of the gods given to them in tandem with their immortality. On the other hand, immortality seems unnatural and eldritch. It feels wrong, as it goes against nature. Villains and antagonists prolong their lives through unnatural means. They become ugly and wretched. Their greed for power consuming everything else in their unending life. The complete opposite of the nobility of good-natured agelessness. These themes, like many themes in fantasy, find their roots in the Lord of the Rings. And for Tolkien, the longing for agelessness and death was one of the core themes of the entire series. The Dunedain ruling class of Gondor and Arnor lost more and more of their longevity, except for the true line of kings, which remained a mystery for hundreds of years. The wisdom of the Dunedain is superior to the greedy nature of the lesser men that are described by Tolkien. The Dunedain's wisdom, like many other superior traits of the ageless and immortal beings in Tolkien's works, work in contrast with the heroic underdog nature of the Immortals, who are generally disconnected and alienated from many affairs of Middle-earth. The Dunedain are rulers because of their supernatural nature and wisdom, yet they are far from being flawless, of course. They were greedy and longed for the immortality of the elves and kept the evil of Sauron alive after Isildur's heart got corrupted by the One Ring of Power. But in the end, Aragorn, Isildur's heir, returned and redeemed himself and his line during the War of the Ring. Next to maybe Gandalf, Aragorn was the wisest of the Fellowship. He showed the qualities people attribute to a good leader and was the embodiment of the Philosopher King. This leads us to our first point. To make agelessness, longevity, and especially immortality into an interesting trait of your world building. Your immortality or longevity should be veiled into a general theme, or at least a purpose on why they might live longer than the short-lived races. It could be character traits you want to explore that come from said immortality, perhaps wisdom of an old long-lived character, or the aspirations of a power-hungry, ageless being. There were multiple purposes for Aragorn. For one, Aragorn was the returning king, wise and beyond humans, but this theme is by far outshadowed by Aragorn's way more interesting exploration of the theme of immortality and death, as Aragorn decided to die at the age of 210 years. The love story of Arwen and Aragorn is an exploration of immortality, time, and death. Arwen was aware that Aragorn might die one day, that he will leave her behind on Middle-earth, yet her love for him was stronger than her desire for the elvish immortality. So shortly after, Arwen followed Aragorn into the embrace of death out of her grief. Aragorn's argument to Arwen was that death was a cause of sorrow, but not for despair. Yet as an elf, Arwen didn't understand this, as the understanding of death was the gift of men. And the exploration of love in death and immortality is common in mythology, fairy tales and literature. Dracula and his love for Mina Harker, or the many iterations of vampire stories that followed, are another good example, written in a story that came before Tolkien. In the most famous Dungeons & Dragons module, Curse of Strahd, the main antagonist is Strahd von Zarovich, a Dracula stand-in who rules over the misty lands of Barovia. He cursed the lands so that those who enter may never leave without his permission. And even in death, their souls are trapped and reborn as the new generation of Barovia. Strahd's tyranny had one goal: to turn his love Tatiana into a full-fledged vampire who of course will undoubtedly return his irrational love. His plans got foiled again and again as the reincarnations of Tatiana died again and again, until the age of the Adventurer module. And now reborn as Irena, she must survive another assault of the Tyrant Strahd, this time defended by the player characters who, when all goes well, defeat Strahd once and for all in his castle. Strahd has many appearances in the module and makes an overall good villain for a TTRPG campaign. Strahd is the absolute opposite of Aragorn, despite borrowing similar themes. Strahd is irrational and evil, greedy and lustful. He's a tyrant and as far from a good ruler as he can be. This brings us to our second point. Immortality and agelessness should bring with flaws. While the Dunedain longed for immortality and the elves for the understanding of death, Strahd turned more and more manic and evil. There's nothing good-natured within this vampire, and he's entirely driven by his mania for one woman. One might say Strahd lost his free will in exchange for his vampiric immortality he obtained by dealing with the dark beings of the Shadowfell. Strahd must feast on blood and souls to survive. Strahd is seen as a monster by everyone but himself, and he is hated by every reincarnation of his love Tatiana. The flaws of the undead immortals like vampires and liches are easy to think about, but the flaws of the ageless like elves or even for the long-living might be a bit harder. To grant your immortals or long-lived fitting flaws, look at the purpose of their longevity within your story, and you should find an answer. Before we get to point 3, think about commenting about your world's long-living races. Maybe even like and subscribe if you are already scrolling down. I've got many more videos about fantasy world building coming up. Anyways, one of the more personal flaws Strahd von Zarovich had was his condescending nature towards others and especially non-vampires and the heroes that eventually bested him. But Strahd isn't the only one of his immortal kind sharing this trait. While the elves and dwarves and Lord of the Rings and many other fantasy properties show that this isn't exclusive to the villains and antagonists of the story, the Ascians in Final Fantasy XIV are probably my most favorite example of this trait. To be honest, the Ascians are one of my favorite examples of immortals in general. They see humanity as lesser to them, themselves as superior. Like any good antagonist, the Ascians see themselves as the heroes of their own story, their evil deeds justified by their superiority over everyone else.
But yes, moral relativism and all that. Case in point. I do not consider you to be truly alive, ergo I will not be guilty of murder if I kill you.
This is obviously a flaw, but not in the same vein as point 2. The hubris of the longer-lived races and people, no matter if immortal or just long-living, is a core part of their theme, especially in contrast to the short-lived mortals that disprove their hubris, either as their allies or when fighting against them as pro and antagonists. This hubris is a result from their old age. The many experiences the ageless gained throughout their long lives, no matter if good or bad. They see themselves in the right because of the many experiences that forged them, which leads us to another trait their old age might grant them, their different outlook on life. Their point of view is distorted, literally ageless. Not only are their experiences shaped by a lot more detail than of the mere mortals, but their entire set of thought and behavior changes because of their age. The most obvious change is the passage of time. The older you get, the quicker the days pass by. Now imagine if you were a few hundred years old, or a few thousand, or even older. I already mentioned the manga a year ago when I made my my video about elves. But by now this manga bloomed into a perfectly adapted anime I can use footage from. Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, is a story about an elven mage that was part of the hero's group that defeated the Demon Lord. The 10 years frieren traveled with their companions passed by an instant for her, which is why she never really connected to them. Only after the hero Himmel's passing from old age, frieren has a sudden realization that she will never be able to truly learn to know Himmel, which pains her a lot. The entire story of the manga and anime deals with the passage of time and the death of your loved ones. There might be demons doing mischief from time to time, but they aren't the true antagonists. Time is. And eventually that time might run out, even for Frieren's new companions, Fern and Stark, who are both humans. Frieren heavily borrows from the themes of Arwen's and Aragorn's love. Aragorn and the hero Himmel being both heroic figures who were in love with an elf. Both Himmel and Aragorn tried to show their love, the importance of the moment in the fleeting life, but both didn't really understand until it was too late. The theme of true agelessness and of old age and time is the strongest theme for immortality, and one you shouldn't miss. No matter your purpose for your long living and immortal, no matter the flaws that hinder them from achieving greatness, or no matter their hubris over the lower races. And of course, this only really works in contrast to mortals. This is the end of the video. I hope you liked it. Tell me about your immortal or long-lived races in your world building, and maybe even leave a like and subscribe. See ya!